You're looking at a map, and way up here, in the cold, dark, angry part of the North Atlantic, you see this island. A place born from a tectonic rage so violent it's literally tearing the world apart. A remote, uninhabitable rock of fire and ice. The truth is, it should be empty, but it's not. In fact, it's one of the most prosperous and peaceful nations on Earth, and the home of the Icelandic horse. Before we deep dive into the history, my name is Boris, and I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what was the best part of your day? Feel free to share it in the comments below. And if you find comfort or curiosity in these calm history journeys, consider giving the video a like and maybe even subscribing for more. Now, settle in. Let's drift gently into the past. You think I'm kidding? The real question is, how? How did a nation forged in volcanic fury, settled by Vikings running for their lives, and squeezed for centuries under the thumb of foreign kings, become a beacon of anything at all? This isn't just a history lesson. It's the story of a people who learned to live on the edge of the world, who wrote their own legends in the shadow of glaciers, and who built a nation from nothing but grit and an almost insane refusal to die. Let's break it down. So before there were sagas, before there were Vikings, there was just the island. And to be clear, the island didn't want anyone here. It was, and still is, a violent, primordial construction site, born from the relentless volcanic activity of the mid-Atlantic ridge, where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates are ripping the planet open. For millions of years, magma oozed to the surface, building a landmass in the middle of nowhere. At this point, the Earth's raw power isn't hidden deep below. It's the landlord, and it's always home. But it's a land of contradictions. For all its fire, it's also a land of ice. During successive ice ages, colossal glaciers gouged their way across the island, carving fjords and mountains. Even today, what's left of them covers about 11% of the country, a figure that's shrinking, by the way, thanks to our warming climate. This eternal dance between a molten core and a frozen crust gives Iceland its character. It's beautiful, yes, but it's a brutal kind of beauty. For most of human history, everyone got the hint. The island stayed empty. It was one of the last places on Earth for humans to settle. Old texts whisper about Irish monks, the Papa, who might have sailed here seeking solitude. But the truth is, there's no definitive archaeological proof they did anything more than visit for a while before leaving. They were ghosts in the mist. The island remained wild, waiting for people who were either brave enough or just desperate enough to call it home. At this point, we get to the 9th century. This is the Viking Age, and across Scandinavia, things are getting messy. In Norway, a king named Harald Fairhair decided he wanted to be the only king, and he wasn't asking nicely. For a lot of proud, independent chieftains and free farmers, the choice was simple: bend the knee or get out. They were the best sailors of their age, and they started hearing whispers of a big, empty island out west. A blank slate. A place where nobody could tell them what to do. The most insane part: recent archaeological evidence suggests there might have been a few seasonal or temporary camps there even before the main event, possibly as early as 800 CE. But the traditional story, the one that kicks everything off, starts in 874 AD with a chieftain named Ingolfur Arnason. Fleeing a feud in Norway, he sailed for this new land. Being a man of his time, he performed a pagan ritual, tossing his high-seat pillars overboard and vowing to build his farm wherever the gods decided they should wash ashore. It took his slaves 3 years to find them. 3 years. Eventually, they located the pillars in a bay steaming with geothermal hot springs. He called it Reykjavik, the Smoky Bay, and established the first permanent Norse settlement. And just like that, the floodgates opened. For the next 60 years, a wave of colonists crossed the North Atlantic. They were primarily Norse, but a good number also came from Viking settlements in the British Isles. These ships weren't just carrying Norwegian men, they brought families, livestock, and a significant number of Celtic people, mostly as slaves or wives, adding a whole different genetic and cultural layer to the mix. Life for them was a nightmare. They arrived in a harsh, alien world with long, dark winters and unforgiving weather. They had to figure out how to farm on volcanic soil and build turf houses that wouldn't collapse on them. They were completely cut off from everything they knew, forced to rely on nothing but themselves. They weren't building a new Norway, they were becoming Icelanders. And without a king to worry about, they were about to try a political experiment that was, for its time, completely insane. Having run away from one king, the early Icelanders had absolutely no interest in creating another one. For decades, the island was just a collection of independent farms. But as more people showed up, they needed rules to stop them from killing each other. They needed a government, but without a monarch or an army. Their solution was revolutionary. In 930 AD, they established a national assembly at a place called Thingvellir, the Assembly Fields. This was the Althing. While other ancient assemblies exist, the Althing is widely considered the world's oldest surviving parliament. The location was perfect. It's in a rift valley, literally on the crack between two continents. Every summer, chieftains called Godar and free men from all over Iceland would gather here. It was the heart of the nation. But here's what nobody tells you about the Althing. It had no executive power. At its center was the law speaker, a man whose job was to memorize and recite the entire legal code from a rock over a 3-year period. They could make laws and judge disputes, but they had no king or police to actually enforce the rulings. This was a decentralized republic in the middle of the Viking Age, and it worked for a while. Its first great test came around the year 1000. The King of Norway, a very enthusiastic Christian convert, was putting serious pressure on Iceland to ditch the Old Norse gods. He wasn't above threats, even holding the sons of Icelandic chieftains hostage to make his point. The nation was split, civil war was coming. So, the Althing did what it does. They handed the problem to the pagan law speaker, Thorgeir Ljósvetningagodi, and asked him to decide for everyone. He went into his tent, threw a cloak over his head, and thought about it for a day and a night. When he came out, he declared that Iceland would officially become Christian. But, in a brilliant compromise, he ruled that people could still worship the old gods in private. A bloody religious war was avoided through parliamentary debate. This era is called the Age of the Sagas. It was during these centuries that the great Icelandic sagas were written down, epic stories of the settlement, of blood feuds, honor, and survival. Works like Njal's saga are incredible pieces of literature that preserved the language and created a national identity. For 300 years, Icelanders governed themselves and created a culture that would rival any in the world. But a golden age based on an honor system can't last forever. The very thing that made the Commonwealth unique, its lack of central authority, was also its fatal flaw. If you won a court case, enforcing the verdict was your problem. This led to endless cycles of violence and revenge, the exact feuds you read about in the sagas. By the 13th century, this flaw became a gaping wound. Power, once spread out, was now concentrated in the hands of a few super-wealthy families. What followed was a 40-year civil war known as the Age of the Sturlungs, named for the most powerful clan. The old system collapsed, replaced by brute force. The country was tearing itself apart over the ambitions of a few powerful men. And the King of Norway, Håkon IV, was watching. He saw his chance, playing the clans against each other, offering power and titles if they would just swear loyalty to him. After decades of bloodshed, many Icelanders were exhausted. The peace the Commonwealth was supposed to provide was gone. At this point, the stability of a foreign king started to look better than the constant chaos at home. The end came between 1262 and 1264. One by one, the chieftains signed the Old Covenant, swearing loyalty to the Norwegian king. In return, he promised peace and regular trade ships. With that, the independent Icelandic Commonwealth was over. They had traded their freedom for stability. It was a decision born of pure exhaustion, and it would lead to almost 7 centuries of foreign rule. Submitting to Norway was supposed to bring peace and prosperity. It didn't. It was the start of a long, dark period of poverty and disaster that would push the Icelanders to the absolute brink. In 1397, things got worse. The Kalmar Union merged the crowns of Norway, Sweden and Denmark, with Denmark becoming the dominant power. When the union fell apart, Iceland, still tied to Norway, became a Danish territory. And Denmark didn't care much about Iceland. In the 17th century, they imposed a trade monopoly. Icelanders could only trade with Denmark, forced to buy Danish goods at high prices and sell their own products for almost nothing. It choked the economy for 200 years. Then came religious oppression. In the mid-16th century, Denmark went Protestant and decided Iceland would too. The Catholic bishop, Jon Arason, led a fierce resistance. In 1550, he and his 2 sons were captured and beheaded. The Reformation was enforced, and the church's vast lands were seized by the Danish crown. As if that wasn't enough, the planet itself seemed to turn on them. The Little Ice Age brought colder, longer winters. Volcanoes erupted constantly, poisoning the land and killing livestock. The Black Death arrived in the 15th century, followed by waves of smallpox that repeatedly wiped out huge portions of the population. The single worst disaster in all of Icelandic history hit in 1783. The Laki volcanic fissure erupted for 8 months, spewing out a toxic cloud of sulfur dioxide that created a poisonous haze called the Mist Hardships. In Iceland, it was apocalyptic. The acid rain poisoned the ground, killing over half the nation's cattle and 3/4 of its sheep and horses. The famine that followed killed about 1/4 of the entire human population. The situation was so bad that some Danish officials seriously debated just evacuating the survivors and abandoning the island completely. But they didn't leave. Through it all, they survived. They held on in their turf houses, preserved their language, and kept telling the stories of their golden age. This suffering created a resilience that would fuel their next great fight, the one for their independence. The 19th century brought new ideas to Europe: nationalism, romanticism, self-determination. In Iceland, these ideas found fertile ground. A new generation of intellectuals, many educated in Copenhagen, started looking back at the sagas and imagining a future where Iceland was free again. The leader of this movement was a scholar named Jon Sigurdsson. Born on June 17th, now Iceland's National Day, he was a historian who spent his life in Copenhagen publishing the ancient sagas and legal texts. He built the intellectual case for independence, arguing that the Old Covenant was a personal pledge to a king, not a surrender of sovereignty to the Danish state. His fight was patient and peaceful, and slowly, it worked. In 1845, the Althing was brought back as an advisory body. In 1855, the crippling Danish trade monopoly was finally abolished. The big breakthrough came in 1874, the 1,000-year anniversary of the settlement. The Danish king granted Iceland its first constitution, giving the Althing power over its own domestic affairs. In 1904, they got home rule, moving the government from Copenhagen to Reykjavik. The momentum was unstoppable. On December 1st, 1918, as World War I was ending, Denmark signed the Act of Union. This recognized Iceland as a fully sovereign and independent state in a personal union with the Danish king. Denmark would handle foreign affairs for a while, and the deal could be revisited in 25 years. After 650 years, Iceland was sovereign again. The final step to becoming a full republic would come thanks to the chaos of another world war. When World War II started, Iceland declared itself neutral, but its location in the North Atlantic was too important to be ignored. In April 1940, Nazi Germany invaded and occupied Denmark, cutting Iceland off from its king. The British, fearing a German invasion of Iceland, decided to act. On May 10, 1940, the people of Reykjavik woke up to British warships in their harbour. The invasion was swift and bloodless. A year later, the defence of Iceland was handed over to the United States. This period, which Icelanders call Blessad Stridid, or the Blessed War, changed everything. The arrival of tens of thousands of Allied soldiers created an economic boom. Unemployment disappeared. The isolation that had defined Iceland for centuries was shattered overnight. The war gave Iceland the perfect chance to complete its journey. With Denmark occupied, renegotiating the Act of Union was impossible. So, in a 1944 referendum, Icelanders voted by a 97% majority to terminate the Union and establish a republic. On June 17, 1944, Jon Sigurdsson's birthday, at the sacred ground of Thingvellir, the Republic of Iceland was formally declared. After centuries of struggle, Iceland was finally completely independent. In the years that followed, Iceland found its place. It became a founding member of the UN and, controversially, of NATO in 1949. The economy was driven by fishing, which led to a series of confrontations with the UK known as the Cod Wars, disputes over fishing rights that the tiny nation, incredibly, won. It became a leader in social progress, electing the world's first female president, Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, in 1980. The 21st century brought new challenges. In 2008, its deregulated and massively oversized banking system collapsed, triggering the largest financial crisis per capita in history. But in a display of that same old resilience, Iceland recovered with incredible speed. From the first settler who threw his house pillars into the sea, trusting the gods to guide him, to the modern nation that powers itself with the geothermal energy boiling right under its feet, the story of Iceland is about endurance. It's a saga written in fire and ice, a story of a people who built a pioneering democracy when the world was full of kings, who held on to their culture through centuries of darkness, and who peacefully won their freedom. They survived famine, plagues, and volcanoes. They faced total economic collapse and pulled themselves back from the brink. They answered the question of how a remote, seemingly impossible island could become a modern marvel. They did it with a stubborn resilience, a deep connection to their beautiful, brutal land, and an unbreakable spirit forged in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. This has been the entire, unbelievable saga of Iceland. So, you think you know about Vikings, fire, steel, longships cutting through icy waves, but what if I told you the most important thing they carried wasn't an axe or a shield? It was an animal they hand-picked to take to the literal end of the world, a volcanic island of ice and fire. This is the story of how that animal, a horse, not only survived one of the harshest landscapes on Earth, but became the living soul of a nation. It's a story of a survivor, a partner, and a national treasure. This is the entire history of the Viking horse. Now let's start at the beginning. We're in the Viking Age, late 8th to the 11th centuries. Norsemen are pushing out from Scandinavia. They're not just raiding, they're colonizing, and they set their sights on a huge empty island in the North Atlantic, Iceland, a blank canvas of volcanic rock and glaciers. So you decide to move your whole family there to build a new life from scratch. Congratulations. You have to pack everything you need onto a cramped, open-decked longship for a terrible long journey across the ocean. Space is tight. You only bring the essentials. And for the Vikings, their most essential asset was their horse. But here's what nobody tells you. They didn't just grab any horse. They chose their absolute best, the strongest, smartest, calmest animals they had. These horses were a mix of tough Scandinavian breeds, think ancestors of the Norwegian fjord, and Celtic ponies from the British Isles. This genetic cocktail was the foundation stock. Now picture the scene. Your longship finally hits a rocky beach after weeks at sea. The ramp goes down, and out walks this horse. It's stout, shaggy, and smaller than the war horses back in Europe. And it takes one look around at the black sand, the lava fields, the menacing glaciers, and probably thinks, "You have got to be kidding me." In a land with basically no native mammals besides the Arctic fox, this horse wasn't just a beast of burden. It was the engine of settlement. Without it, you couldn't build a home, clear land, or travel. The Vikings didn't just bring a horse to Iceland, they brought a partner. And that bond was forged not in glorious battle, but in the cold, hard reality of trying not to die. So the Vikings and their horses are getting settled. But around the end of the 10th century, the Icelandic parliament, the Althing, made a decision that changed everything. The date everyone throws around is 982 AD, but real talk, it was somewhere in that ballpark. They passed a law. No more horses could be imported into Iceland. Ever. Why? Probably because they tried bringing in some new bloodlines, and it was a disaster. It weakened the stock, and an isolated island is a sitting duck for foreign diseases. So they shut the door. They created a closed gene pool that has been sealed off from the rest of the world for over 1,000 years. This act made the Icelandic horse one of the purest breeds on the entire planet. But isolation was only half the story. The other half was the forge, Iceland itself. This place was a crucible of natural selection. It's not a gentle pasture. It's a land of long, brutal winters, treacherous lava fields, and powerful glacial rivers. Grazing is sparse and often buried under snow. Congratulations. You're a horse in Iceland. Too bad weakness is a death sentence. If you weren't sure-footed, you'd break a leg in a lava field and die. If you didn't have a thick, double-layered winter coat, you'd freeze. If you weren't smart enough to dig through snow to find food, you'd starve. The land itself was the breeder, and it had a zero-tolerance policy. Generation after generation, only the toughest, calmest, and most resourceful horses survived. Then came the character-building events. Volcanic eruptions would blanket the island in toxic ash, poisoning the land and killing off massive numbers of livestock. The Laki eruption in the 1780s was the kicker. It wiped out an estimated 70% of the entire horse population. But the few that survived, they were the ultimate survivors, carrying the genes for ultimate toughness. The horse that came out of this 1,000-year trial by fire and ice was small but insanely strong. It was a living testament to what happens when you combine careful selection with brutal, unforgiving nature. So while the horse was being physically perfected by the landscape, it was also becoming a legend. To the Norse settlers, a horse was never just an animal. It was sacred. It was a bridge to the world of the gods, and at the center of it all is Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse of the head god, Odin. Sleipnir was the best of all horses, able to travel between the 9 worlds. He was Odin's ride into battle, to the land of the giants, even down to the realm of the dead. This image of the ultimate divine horse shaped how Icelanders saw their own animals. Their horse was their personal Sleipnir, the creature that carried them through the known world. And this wasn't just a nice story. High-status Vikings were often buried with their favorite horse. Congratulations, you're a big-shot chieftain. you die. Your best horse is coming with you to carry you to Valhalla. This bond is all over the Icelandic sagas. In these stories, horses aren't just props. They're main characters with names and personalities. A prized stallion could start a blood feud that wiped out entire families. Giving someone a good horse was a sign of huge respect. Harming someone's horse was a fatal insult. And then there's the folklore. Icelanders believed their horses had a connection to the elves, the Huldufolk, or hidden people. A horse might be seen as having a special wisdom, a foot in both the human and the magical worlds. So this wasn't just your work animal, it was a piece of the enchanted landscape itself. If you're enjoying this journey into the heart of Icelandic history, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We have a lot more histories to explore, and we'd love for you to be a part of them. For centuries, the Icelandic horse was a local secret, but when it finally hit the world stage, people noticed something bizarre: the way it moves. Most horses have 3 gaits: walk, trot, gallop. The Icelandic horse has 5, and these 2 extra gaits aren't trained tricks. They're a genetic gift from their Viking ancestors. So you have the walk, the trot, and the canter, gallop, standard stuff. But then you have the tolt. The tolt is a 4-beat gait, but the kicker is its smoothness. There's always at least 1 foot on the ground, so all the bouncing of a trot just disappears. The horse glides. The famous party trick is a rider at a full-speed tolt holding a brimful glass of beer without spilling a drop. And no, it's not a trick. This wasn't for show, it was for survival. If you're spending all day in the saddle crossing rugged terrain, you want a comfortable ride. The tolt was fast, efficient, and saved both the horse and the rider from exhaustion. It was the original all-terrain vehicle. The 5th gait is the skade, or flying pace. This is pure, unadulterated speed. It's a lateral gait where the horse's legs on the same side move together, and there's a moment of suspension where all 4 feet are off the ground. It's basically horseflight. It's used for racing on smooth tracks and can hit speeds up to 30 miles per hour. A horse that can do both the tolt and the flying pace is considered a true master. The wildest part: scientists found the genetic switch for this, a mutation in the DMRT3 gene, the gatekeeper gene. This mutation was actually around in medieval England, likely spread by Vikings who wanted that smooth ride for long journeys. But while it was bred out of most other European horses, Iceland's total isolation preserved it. It's a genetic key that unlocks a direct link to what the original Vikings wanted in a horse. For 1,000 years, until cars showed up, the Icelandic horse was called Þarfasti þjóninn, the most useful servant. In a country with no real roads, the horse was everything. It was the nation's living infrastructure. The entire rhythm of life moved at the speed of a horse. Doctor needs to reach a sick patient? Horse. Priest needs to visit a parish? Horse. Mail, laws, trade goods, all moved on horseback. This horse was your pickup truck, your school bus, and your ambulance, all in one. They could cross lava fields that would destroy other horses and ford glacial rivers with an intelligence that literally saved their riders' lives. This partnership was most obvious during the Retir, the annual sheep roundup. Farmers on horseback spend weeks in the remote highlands gathering thousands of sheep. No ATV or dirt bike can do what these horses do on that terrain. It's a living tradition that still happens today because the horse is still the best tool for the job. But here's the real talk. The bond went deeper. During Iceland's darkest times, famine, brutal winters, the horse was the last resort. The decision to kill your horse, your partner, your only means of transport, was heartbreaking. But it could mean the difference between your family starving to death or surviving. This shared struggle, where your partner was also your emergency food supply, created a bond that's hard for outsiders to understand. This wasn't a master and a servant, it was a partnership of mutual survival. Now, Fast forward to the 20th century. Roads and cars arrive in Iceland, and suddenly the most useful servant isn't so useful anymore. The horse population started to drop. It looked like this Viking relic might just fade away. But a funny thing happened. As soon as Icelanders didn't need the horse for work, they started to appreciate it for what it was: a cultural icon, a link to their past, a symbol of their identity. Riding for fun became huge. The horse was reborn as a recreational partner, and the world started to notice. People fell in love with this small, strong, friendly horse with the magic gaits. Today, there are more Icelandic horses living outside of Iceland than in it. They're a global phenomenon. But there's a catch. The old rule still applies in a new way. Once a horse leaves Iceland, it can never, ever come back. Too bad. This one-way ticket policy protects the horses still on the island, who have zero immunity to common horse diseases from the outside world. An outbreak would be catastrophic. So every horse that leaves for a competition or a new owner is on a permanent one-way voyage, just like its ancestors on those Viking longships. Today in Iceland, the horse is everywhere. About 80,000 of them for a nation of just under 400,000 people. They are the backbone of the tourism industry, giving visitors a way to experience the landscape the way the settlers did. They still do the sheep roundups. They are a source of immense national pride. The story of the Icelandic horse is a 1,000-year saga. It starts on a Viking longship, a hand-picked partner for a journey to a new world. It continues through a millennium of isolation, where it was perfected by law and brutalized by nature into what it is today. It became a myth, a legend, and an indispensable partner in survival. This horse survived volcanic cataclysms and the Industrial Revolution, and it didn't just survive, it thrived. Today, it's a global icon, loved for its unique gaits and its deep connection to the people of Iceland. So yeah, the Icelandic horse is more than just a breed. It's a living piece of Viking history. It's a testament to resilience, a symbol of the bond between humans and animals, and the soul of a nation. Forged by ice, chosen by Vikings, and loved by the world, the Icelandic horse isn't just a survivor. It's a legend, carrying the spirit of its homeland in every single sure-footed step.